It was a routine flight, just like any other. Passengers settled into their seats, flight attendants performed their final checks, and the aircraft ascended into the sky. Flight 427 was en route, cutting through the clouds with precision, until something went terribly wrong. There was no distress call, no warning. One moment, the aircraft was on course, and the next, it was gone. A jet full of people swallowed by the sky. What really happened aboard Flight 427? An unforeseen mechanical failure? A catastrophic mistake? Or something no one dared to imagine? For years, the aviation world has searched for answers. Investigators pieced together wreckage, pored over flight data, and scrutinized every possible scenario. Yet, the truth remains elusive. Families were left in anguish, pilots questioned their own safety, and an entire industry was forced to rethink what they thought they knew about air travel. In this video, we retrace the final moments of Flight 427, break down the investigation that followed, and examine the chilling theories that continue to haunt this case. Because even after all this time, one question remains unanswered. Did we ever truly find the truth? September 8th, 1994. A routine evening in the skies. Flight 427, a Boeing 737, lifted off from Chicago O'Hare, bound for Pittsburgh. The weather was clear, the aircraft performed as expected, and the voices from the cockpit carried the same measured calm heard on thousands of flights before. At 7:03 p.m., the plane was nearing its destination. The descent had begun, and the crew exchanged routine confirmations with air traffic control. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The aircraft banked unexpectedly, sharply, violently. The nose tilted downward, and the jet entered a rapid descent. From 6,000 feet, the ground rushed closer at an unimaginable speed. Inside the cabin, there was no time for understanding, no time for reaction. Flight attendants braced, passengers gripped their seats, and in the cockpit, the pilots fought desperately for control. The last recorded transmission was a chilling, unintelligible sound, one that would later be analyzed over and over, yet still leave more questions than answers. Air traffic control tried to reach the crew. No response. They watched helplessly as Flight 427's radar signal blinked. Once, twice, then disappeared entirely. Minutes later, emergency calls flooded in. A crash site had been found. Just north of Pittsburgh, a smoldering field now held the remains of what, moments ago, had been a fully intact aircraft. Rescue teams raced to the scene, but there were no survivors. What could cause a jet to plummet so suddenly without warning? Was it mechanical failure, a human error, or something that had never been seen before? Stay with us as we break down the final moments, the investigation that followed, and the evidence that led to one of the most unsettling discoveries in aviation history. The crash of Flight 427 sent shockwaves through the aviation world. Within hours, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board were on site, combing through the wreckage. But as the days turned into weeks, one thing became clear. This would not be an ordinary investigation. The crash site was devastating. The aircraft had hit the ground at an almost vertical angle, leaving behind little more than fragmented debris. Identifying key components was a challenge. Yet, among the wreckage, investigators knew two critical pieces of evidence had to be found: the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. Recovery teams worked relentlessly. Every twisted piece of metal, every scattered fragment was a potential clue. Then, after an exhaustive search, the black boxes were finally retrieved. But what they revealed was far from simple. The cockpit voice recording was brief, cutting off before the pilots could fully grasp what was happening. A sudden exclamation, a burst of confusion, then silence. The flight data recorder told an equally troubling story. The aircraft's autopilot had disengaged just seconds before the rapid descent. There were no signs of intentional pilot input, no warnings of an impending stall, no clear mechanical failures recorded in those final moments. Something had caused the plane to veer sharply. Something had forced it into a deadly plunge. But what? Investigators turned to the aircraft's controls. One theory gained traction: the possibility of a rudder system failure, an event so rare and catastrophic that few had ever considered it. Could a single malfunction in the rudder mechanism have sealed the fate of Flight 427? The wreckage provided clues, but the black boxes held the key. What the NTSB discovered next would change aviation safety forever. The crash of Flight 427 left more questions than answers. The NTSB was determined to uncover the truth, but as their investigation deepened, conflicting theories began to emerge. Was this a case of catastrophic mechanical failure? A moment of human error? Or was there something else, something no one had considered? One of the first theories examined was a possible failure in the aircraft's control systems. The Boeing 737 had long been considered a reliable workhorse of the skies, but no machine is without flaws. Engineers began dissecting the possibility that a flaw in the rudder system had caused the aircraft to enter an uncontrollable dive. At the center of this theory was a key component, the rudder power control unit. In rare cases, this mechanism could jam, causing the rudder to move in the opposite direction of the pilot's command. If this had happened at 6,000 feet, Flight 427's fate would have been sealed in a matter of seconds. Boeing engineers insisted that such an event was nearly impossible. The aircraft had passed all safety inspections, and no prior incidents had pointed to a systemic issue. But as investigators sifted through the wreckage and analyzed previous near misses involving similar aircraft, an unsettling pattern began to emerge. Could this have been a failure waiting to happen? Then came the counter-argument: human error. Some experts suggested that the pilots, faced with a sudden and unexpected event, may have reacted incorrectly. The rapid bank and descent were extreme. But what if, in their struggle to regain control, a miscalculated response had made the situation worse? Supporters of this theory pointed to the lack of clear communication in the cockpit's final moments. The flight crew didn't issue a distress call, and their final recorded words were panicked and indistinct. If a critical control system had failed, why wasn't there an immediate declaration of an emergency? Did the pilots know what was happening, or were they as confused as investigators would later be? And then there were the more unsettling possibilities. Some whispered about sabotage, an unthinkable act of terrorism or deliberate interference. While no evidence of foul play was ever officially found, theories persisted. In an era when aviation security was evolving, was it possible that something had happened aboard Flight 427 that investigators simply never uncovered? The wreckage provided clues. The black boxes held data. But the truth? That was something investigators would have to fight to piece together. What do you believe happened aboard Flight 427? A mechanical flaw buried within the aircraft's design? A split-second decision gone wrong? Or something that still, to this day, remains beyond explanation? The investigation into Flight 427 was one of the most complex in aviation history. But long after the last pieces of wreckage were collected and the theories were debated, the real weight of the tragedy remained with those left behind. For the families of the victims, the pain wasn't just in losing their loved ones. It was in the uncertainty. They were left with questions that no one could fully answer. In those final moments, did their loved ones know what was happening? Was there fear? Was there suffering? These were thoughts that haunted them for years. Some families found closure in the investigation's findings. Others never did. They attended hearings, spoke at press conferences, demanded accountability. Some spent decades seeking the truth, unwilling to accept that a routine flight could simply fall from the sky without a clear, indisputable reason. The emotional toll was immeasurable. Husbands, wives, children, entire families torn apart in an instant. Some turned to advocacy, pushing for reforms to ensure no other family would have to endure what they did. Others retreated, unable to face the endless cycle of speculation and unanswered questions. But it wasn't just the families who felt the impact. The crash of Flight 427 sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. Suddenly, passengers began questioning their safety in ways they never had before. Could a plane malfunction mid-flight with no warning? Could pilots lose control in seconds with no chance to recover? Trust in air travel was shaken. Airlines faced scrutiny. The Boeing 737, once seen as a reliable aircraft, now carried a shadow of doubt. Safety protocols were reviewed, systems reevaluated, and flight procedures re-examined. The incident forced changes in aircraft design, pilot training, and aviation safety measures, changes that continue to shape modern air travel. But even with all the improvements, the scars of Flight 427 remain. The investigation may have ended, but for the families, for the aviation industry, and for the passengers who still look out their windows and wonder, it's a tragedy that will never truly be forgotten. How did the world move on from such a disaster? And what lasting changes came from it? The crash of Flight 427 was more than just a tragedy. It was a turning point. In its aftermath, investigators and engineers were forced to confront difficult truths. It wasn't enough to understand what had happened. They had to make sure it never happened again. The investigation led to one of the most significant changes in aviation safety. Boeing was pressured to re-examine its aircraft design, and the rudder control system, the very mechanism suspected of causing the crash, became the center of a major overhaul. New mechanical checks were introduced. Pilots were trained to recognize and respond to unexpected rudder movements. The industry could no longer ignore the possibility of a hidden flaw buried deep within an aircraft's systems. But the changes didn't stop there. Flight data monitoring became more advanced, allowing investigators to track even the smallest irregularities in real time. Black box technology improved, ensuring that future disasters wouldn't leave so many unanswered questions. Regulations tightened, safety measures strengthened, and the lessons of Flight 427 became embedded in the protocols that protect millions of passengers today. Still, not everyone was satisfied with the official explanation. Even years later, theories persist. Was the rudder truly to blame? Or was there another factor, one that slipped through the cracks of the investigation? Some believe that the final moments of Flight 427 hold secrets that were never fully uncovered. That somewhere, hidden in the data, in the wreckage, in the moments lost to time, there are still pieces of the story waiting to be understood. But one thing is certain, the legacy of Flight 427 extends far beyond that fateful evening. It lives on in every safety measure that prevents another disaster, in every pilot trained to handle the unexpected, in every passenger who steps onto a plane and trusts that the lessons of the past have made the skies safer. The mystery of Flight 427 may never be fully solved, but its impact, that will last forever. What do you think really happened that night? Let us know in the comments below. Flight 427 left behind more than just wreckage. It left a legacy of mystery, of loss, and of hard lessons learned. In the years that followed, the aviation industry adapted, investigators uncovered critical truths, and families found ways to honor the memories of those they lost. But even now, questions remain. The final moments of Flight 427 may never be fully understood. The voices from the cockpit, the sudden descent, the struggle for control. It all happened in mere seconds, yet its impact stretches across decades. What happened that night shaped aviation history, forcing changes that continue to keep passengers safe today. And so, the story of Flight 427 isn't just about tragedy. It's about progress. About uncovering the flaws we once overlooked. About ensuring that no flight, no passenger, no family has to endure the same unanswered questions. But as history has shown, the sky still holds its mysteries. And some stories may never be complete. If you found this breakdown of Flight 427 fascinating, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And if you have your own theories about what truly happened that night, join the discussion in the comments below.